So I want you to picture this. You are sitting in like a really high-stakes business meeting, right?
Oh boy. I can already feel the stress.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Wow.
that massive polished mahogany table. Everyone is wearing their absolute most serious, unblinking meeting faces.
Right. Total silence in the room.
Dead quiet. And suddenly the spotlight swings over to you. The head of the department leans in and asks for your strategic input on the new software rollout.
Okay, the pressure is on.
And you actually have a brilliant idea in your head. It is crystal clear. So you open your mouth to deliver this like game-changing insight. And instead of saying, we need to improve the customer portal,
Uh-oh.
you look your boss dead in the eye and say, we need to improve the customer potato.
Oh no. That is the absolute nightmare scenario for anyone communicating in a second language.
I feel secondhand panic just thinking about it.
Because suddenly you're not proposing a tech upgrade anymore. You're proposing like a starch-based agricultural revolution right in the middle of a software meeting.
Exactly. But that specific, incredibly cringe-inducing anecdote is actually the perfect jumping-off point for us today. Welcome to the English Boost podcast, by the way. Today, we are taking a stack of fantastic source material focused entirely on conversation practice and professional communication.
It's such good stuff.
It really is. And our mission today is to completely deconstruct what it actually means to be a confident speaker, because the material reveals this massive, almost universal misconception about what confidence really looks like when you're speaking a language that isn't your native tongue.
Yeah, that misconception is just incredibly pervasive. If you survey language learners, the vast majority believe that confidence is basically synonymous with perfection.
Right, like you have to be flawless.
Exactly. They assume it means speaking at breakneck speed, having a flawless accent,
Yeah.
and never ever having to search your brain for a vocabulary word.
Which is impactful.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
And as the customer potato incident perfectly illustrates, the actual skill of confident communication has nothing to do with avoiding mistakes. The real mastery lies entirely in the mechanics of how you recover from them.
So let's actually analyze the scene of the crime here. Why did the person in that scenario say potato in the first place? Looking through our notes, it wasn't a lack of vocabulary. They knew the word portal.
Right. The word was in there somewhere.
The breakdown happened entirely because of the pressure. The stakes go up, your heart rate spikes, and suddenly we try to turn into this flawless, high-speed business robot.
Which brings us to a really fascinating psychological trap from the sources that we can call the speed myth.
The speed myth. Okay, let's unpack that.
So there is this deeply ingrained biological and social assumption that speaking fast equals fluency. Learners will listen to native speakers at a coffee shop or like in a movie and think, wow, look how fast they talk. They never hesitate.
Yeah, they just machine gun the words out.
Right. So the logical conclusion they draw is that to sound confident, they need to hit the gas pedal.
Makes sense on the surface.
It does. But what's really happening on a physiological level is actually a mild fight-or-flight response.
Mm-hmm.
The brain perceives the silence, it perceives those waiting eyes in the boardroom, and it interprets it as a social threat.
Wow, a threat. So you're not being fluent, you're just fleeing.
Exactly. You speed up not because you are fluent, but because you are essentially trying to sprint away from the discomfort of the spotlight.
But sprinting actually hurts your credibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The research here points out a fascinating timeline. It suggests that fast, rapid-fire English only sounds impressive for about 5 to 7 seconds.
Yeah, 5 to 7 seconds is your maximum grace period.
That's nothing.
It really isn't. Because after that initial burst, the listener's brain undergoes a shift. They stop being dazzled by the sheer speed of the syllables, and they start searching for comprehension.
They actually want to know what you're saying.
Right. They only care about a single metric at that point, which is clarity. Was the idea easy to digest? So when you allow your nerves to dictate your pace, you sacrifice clarity for speed. You slur words, you skip crucial grammatical markers, and ironically, you make yourself much harder to understand.
Okay, I have to push back a little on behalf of anyone who has actually been in that hot seat, though, because telling someone to just slow down, it makes logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But in practice, especially in a professional setting, silence feels physically dangerous.
It really does. It feels terrible.
My own inner voice tells me that if I pause, if I just stop talking for 2 seconds to find a word, everyone in that room is judging my intelligence. It feels like walking on a tightrope without a net.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like if you stop moving forward, gravity just takes over and you fall. The sheer momentum feels like the only thing keeping you on the wire.
The tightrope is a brilliant way to visualize that internal panic.
Mm.
But let's look at the reality of that inner voice. That critic screaming at you to hurry up,
Ooh.
whispering that everyone thinks you're incompetent. Every single person hears that voice. The most eloquent native speakers in the world hear that exact same voice when they are under pressure.
Wait, really? Native speakers get that too?
Absolutely. The differentiator isn't the absence of self-doubt. The differentiator is the ability to manage the cognitive load. And you manage it by understanding the profound psychological difference between freezing and pausing.
Okay, walk us through that distinction. Because from where the audience is sitting, freezing and pausing look identical. The mouth is closed, no sound is coming out.
Externally, yeah, they look exactly the same.
Yeah.
But internally, they are cognitive opposites. Freezing is an involuntary nervous system reaction. It's the amygdala completely hijacking your brain. You've lost access to your vocabulary. You have basically dropped the steering wheel entirely.
Panic mode, got it.
But pausing, on the other hand, is a deliberate, highly controlled executive function action. A useful pause is a moment where you are actively surveying your mental landscape and consciously choosing your next thought.
So it's the difference between the engine just stalling out and you intentionally putting the car in neutral to check the map.
Perfectly stated. And the audience can actually feel that difference. When you take a breath and intentionally pause, you aren't showing weakness. You are demonstrating composure.
You're showing you're in control.
Exactly. You are training the room to wait for you. Confident speakers do not rush through the panic. They establish authority by claiming a moment of silence as their own.
I love that. The idea that a pause is actually a flex. It says, hey, my idea is worth waiting for. But let's bring it back to reality for a second. You take your deliberate pause, you lower your heart rate, you open your mouth, and you still accidentally say potato instead of portal.
Right, because mistakes are inevitable.
Exactly. So what is the protocol for the immediate aftermath?
Well, this is where we see the most stark divergence between a nervous communicator and a masterful one. Let's look at what the speaker actually did after the potato incident in our source material.
Oh, this part is rough.
It is. According to the breakdown, they immediately panicked. They apologized profusely, not once, but 3 times in a row. And then they added this disclaimer. They said, sorry, I'm so bad at explaining things in English.
Which is just painful to read because it is so incredibly relatable. I mean, the ground opens up, you feel the embarrassment flush your cheeks, and your very first instinct is to throw yourself under the bus before your boss can do it for you.
It's a total defense mechanism.
But our material is adamant that this is the absolute most destructive way to handle an error. Why is a self-deprecating apology so toxic in that specific moment?
It really comes down to the fundamental mechanics of attention. Think about your ultimate goal in a meeting. You are trying to transmit a strategic concept from your brain into your colleague's brain.
Right, the message.
When you abruptly stop that transmission to announce, sorry, my English is bad, you violently yank the listener's attention away from your brilliant software strategy. You take a massive, blinding, theatrical spotlight and shine it directly onto your linguistic flaw.
Wow, so the idea just vanishes.
Completely. Your competence suddenly becomes the entire topic of conversation.
You are literally giving the room instructions to ignore your business acumen and focus exclusively on your grammar.
You are sabotaging your own premise. The core philosophy of confident communication from these sources is about protecting the message at all costs. When you attack your own abilities, you leave the message completely unguarded.
It reminds me of driving a group of friends to a restaurant. Imagine you're on the highway and you hit a pothole.
Right, a big bump.
It's jarring, but you don't slam on the brakes, pull the car over to the shoulder, turn around, and apologize to all your passengers for being a fundamentally flawed human being and a terrible driver.
If you did that, your passengers would be terrified. They would literally start wondering if they should call a cab.
Exactly. You don't make them evaluate your driving skills right then and there.
Yeah.
You just want them to enjoy the road trip. You grip the steering wheel, you correct your lane, and you keep driving to the restaurant. The mistake bumped the car, but the destination hasn't changed.
That is a perfect analogy.
So what does that steering wheel correction actually look like in a conversation?
It's what the experts call a micro-correction. It requires zero drama and zero self-flagellation. Instead of delivering a tragic monologue about your language skills, you just say, sorry, I mean customer portal. Or simply, let me correct that customer portal. And then, and this is the critical step, you just keep going. You finish the sentence.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. If I just say, let me correct that, and I breeze past it, doesn't that come off as a bit, I don't know, arrogant? Like, I don't care that I'm wasting people's time with my mistakes.
It's not arrogance at all. It's efficiency. Business environments value efficiency above almost everything else. A 3-second microcorrection respects everyone's time far more than a 30-second apology tour.
That is such a good point.
True confidence isn't about never hitting a pothole. It is entirely about knowing how to stand back up without making a huge scene. Mistakes are just a permanent fixture of human communication. The only skill that actually matters in the long run is getting control of the vehicle again.
Okay, that makes total sense when you are the one transmitting the message. But, communication is a two-way street. What happens when the breakdown isn't your output, but your input? Like, you are sitting in the meeting, you are perfectly calm, but the person across from you uses an idiom or an acronym that you have never heard before.
Ah, yes. This introduces one of the most paralyzing fears we see in the material, the fear of asking for clarification. Many people operating in a second language absolutely loathe asking someone to repeat themselves or explain a point.
Oh, for sure.
They are convinced that failing to understand immediately exposes them as an imposter and that it makes their English look weak.
Because that inner critic tells you, hey, if you belonged in this room, you would have understood the joke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we look at the reality of how native speakers interact, that fear completely falls apart. Native speakers clarify things constantly. Have you ever been in a meeting where a native speaker says, hold on, what do you mean by that? Or, I didn't quite catch that last part, can you unpack it?
Or, just to be clear, are we prioritizing X over Y all the time?
Yeah.
It's kind of a light bulb moment when you realize we hold second language speakers to this impossible standard of instant, flawless telepathy when native speakers don't even hold themselves to that standard.
Asking for clarification isn't a confession of weakness. It is documented proof that you care about the outcome of the conversation. It proves you are invested enough in the project to ensure you've understood the parameters correctly, pretending you understand when you are completely lost.
Yeah.
That isn't confidence. That is just theatrical pretending.
And pretending is a massive liability. There's this concept in our notes that paints a hilarious but also kind of terrifying picture of this. They call it the confused lamp.
Yes, the confused lamp.
You are in a meeting, someone says something totally incomprehensible, and instead of asking them to clarify, you just nod vigorously and smile. You are shining bright on the outside, but you are completely empty on the inside.
It's an amusing visual, but the real-world consequences are actually severe. Consider this scenario. Your boss looks at you on a Tuesday and says, hey, can you handle the boilerplate on that by Friday? And you have absolutely no idea what boilerplate means in this context. But you don't want to look weak. So you turn on the confused lamp, you smile, you nod, you say, absolutely.
Oh no, you just bought a ticket on the Titanic.
You did. You just committed to a Friday deadline for a deliverable you cannot even identify. When Friday arrives, that fake confidence is going to result in a devastating professional conversation. The temporary comfort of nodding is never worth the long-term fallout of failing to deliver.
Okay, the logic is sound. We definitely need to avoid being the confused lamp. But the execution is tricky. How do we ask for clarification without sounding like a panicked deer in headlights? I mean, if I frantically interrupt and yell, what do you mean? I'm not going to look like a meticulous professional.
Tone and nervous system regulation are everything here. The notes advise stripping out what they call the panic voice.
The panic voice?
Yeah, when people get nervous, their vocal pitch often goes up, and their speaking pace accelerates. You want to consciously drop your pitch and use a calm, even measured tone, a curiosity voice, rather than a panic voice.
Okay, that makes sense.
You deploy phrases like, sorry, could you repeat the action point on that? Or just to clarify, what exactly do you need by Friday? When you deliver those phrases with a regulated nervous system, you sound like a high-level colleague who is taking the logistics seriously.
You sound like you are managing the project, not surviving it. I love that. But, it's one thing to understand this philosophy sitting here analyzing it in a studio. When you're staring down a room of executives, philosophy tends to just evaporate.
It goes right out the window.
Exactly. What is the actual parachute a speaker can pull in that exact second when their brain starts to overheat?
This is where we shift from theory to a highly tactical strategy. When a conversation gets slippery, you do not need perfect grammar. You don't need a massive vocabulary. You just need what the sources refer to as a conversational handle.
A handle, like grabbing a handle on a subway train when it suddenly jerks forward. You just need something solid to anchor yourself so you don't fall over.
That is exactly it. And the beauty of this strategy is its sheer simplicity. You don't need 50 handles, you just need three. Three specific types of phrases that you practice until they are deeply ingrained in your muscle memory. You want them preloaded in your brain so you never have to invent a sentence from scratch while your adrenaline is spiking.
Let's actually test this out. Let's role play a bit so we can hear how these handles operate in the wild. I'll play the demanding boss, and I'm going to throw a complex question at you. I'm assuming the first handle is about dealing with that initial moment of shock-like buying time.
Yes, the first handle is the pause.
Hmm.
You need a phrase that claims silence.
Okay, here we go. We are in the boardroom. So, looking at the Q3 projections, how do you think the integration of the new API is going to impact our legacy client retention by the end of the fiscal year?
That is a complex question. Let me organize my thoughts for a second, then I just stop talking.
Well, let me organize my thoughts. Hearing it out loud, it completely shifts the power dynamic. It doesn't sound like you're stuck. It sounds like you have so many brilliant insights that you simply need a moment to file them into the proper folders before presenting them to me.
Exactly. It reframes a mental delay as a massive benefit to the listener. I am taking time to give you a better answer.
Okay, let's keep the scenario going. I asked you about the API, but let's say you missed a piece of it. We need the second handle.
Right. The second handle is clarification, the tool to avoid the confused lamp.
So I say, how will the API impact legacy client retention?
Just to clarify, when you say legacy clients, are we focusing on accounts older than 5 years or all pre-merger accounts?
Oh, that is bulletproof. You narrowed the scope of the question, which makes it easier to answer, and you look incredibly detail-oriented.
Win-win.
Now for the final handle, the recovery. Let's say you're halfway through your brilliant answer and your brain entirely deletes the English word for retention. You just hit a wall.
This is where you use the ultimate linguistic cheat code. I'm speaking, I lose the word, and I smoothly say, actually, let me explain it another way. The goal is keeping the people who have been with us the longest from leaving.
Let me explain it another way. That is phenomenal. You didn't stop to search for the word retention. You didn't apologize for forgetting it. You just pivoted and described the concept using simpler words. You essentially talked around the missing vocabulary.
It is brilliant because it maintains total control of the narrative. It shifts the focus away from a linguistic failure, forgetting a noun, and turns it into a pedagogical choice. It sounds like I decided my first explanation wasn't good enough for you, so I am graciously rewording it to help you understand.
It's like a Jedi mind trick level of communication.
It really is.
But to pull that off, to have the audacity to use those handles, it requires a specific mindset. I'm looking at a section in the notes here about how we talk to ourselves. A lot of people walk around with a deeply held belief, I am bad at English, or I cannot speak confidently. The suggestion here is to upgrade that label to a direction, to say, I am practicing how to pause, clarify, and recover.
Yes, the mindset shift is crucial.
Let me challenge that, though. Does repeating a mantra actually change anything? If someone is terrified of speaking, doesn't telling them to just say, I am practicing, feel a bit like forced toxic positivity?
It's a very fair challenge. But we aren't talking about blindly chanting happy thoughts here. We are talking about the fundamentals of cognitive behavioral shift and neuroplasticity. I cannot speak confidently is a label. A label is a final verdict. When you assign yourself a permanent identity, your brain accepts it as a fixed state. It stops searching for solutions because you've told it the case is closed.
You essentially build a glass ceiling for your own potential.
Precisely. But when you say, I am practicing how to pause, you are providing your brain with a direction. A direction is an action plan. It acknowledges the current difficulty. You aren't pretending it's easy. But it frames confidence not as a genetic trait you lack, but as a mechanical process you are actively learning to execute. Psychologically, this lowers your cortisol. It moves you out of a fixed mindset and into a growth mindset. It gives you a task to focus on rather than an identity to defend.
That distinction between identity and action ties the entire philosophy together, I think. Confident English does not have to be perfect English. They are completely different species.
Completely
You
different.
cannot control if the room is intimidating. You cannot control if someone is impatient or if they notice your accent or if a vocabulary word just completely slips your mind. The environment is entirely out of your hands.
But you have absolute control over how you continue. You control the deliberate pause. You
Yeah.
control the micro-correction.
And the most profound takeaway from all of this is that confidence doesn't magically appear while you are sitting in silence, waiting to feel brave enough to open your mouth.
That is the ultimate trap, waiting for the absence of fear before you speak. Confidence is not a prerequisite for speaking. It is the byproduct of speaking. It is forged in the fire. It grows because you hit a pothole, you experience that spike of adrenaline, you use a handle to recover, and you realize you survived. The action creates the confidence.
So, as we synthesize everything we've explored on the show today, the mission was to figure out what it actually means to be a confident communicator in a second language. And the answer is surprisingly simple. It means you protect your message. You don't let a missing word or a moment of panic derail the brilliant idea you bring to the table.
I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this time establishing that native speakers rely on these exact same tools every single day. The most eloquent, highly paid executives on the planet pause to organize their thoughts. They rephrase their sentences when they get tangled up. They ask for clarification when they lose the thread of the meeting.
Right. It is literally the standard operating procedure for human interaction.
Exactly. So if the ultimate final goal of learning a second language is to communicate like a natural, fluent speaker, why do language learners judge themselves so harshly for using the exact same recovery tools that native speakers use to survive their own meetings?
That is the real question to ask yourself. Why do we punish ourselves for doing the exact thing the experts do?
Using a handle to buy time or clarify a point isn't a sign that your language skills are failing. It's the ultimate proof that you are finally using the language the way it's actually meant to be used, as a living, breathing tool for connection, complete with all the necessary bumps in the road.
If you take nothing else away from our discussion today, take that perspective shift and take your 3 handles. Choose one phrase to pause, one to clarify, and one to recover. Write them down, say them out loud in your car or your kitchen until they are muscle memory. So the next time you find yourself under pressure and you accidentally tell a room full of people that they need to optimize the customer potato, you don't panic. You don't grovel. You just smile, take a deliberate breath, correct the steering wheel, and keep right on driving. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the English Boost Podcast. Take these tools out into the real world this week. Keep practicing, keep recovering, and we'll catch you next time.